Hello, please let me see your ticket stubs for the double-edged double bill. This week, 13th Warrior bombs Gods of Egypt. Each week, Adam Thomas and Thomas Mariani will come to the table to discuss the randomly selected yin and yang of a double feature. Then, both will have to pick a number between 1 and 10 in order to seal their fates for the next episode. One will have two good movies, the other two bad ones. Let the chaos begin. I am Adam Thomas, and I'm clearly from Egypt. Come on. Basically, what the fuck?
And I am Thomas Mariani, and I am clearly a white guy. I'm not going to try and pretend to be something else. I shouldn't be. I really shouldn't. No one should.
No one should.
As will be a recurring factor, unfortunately, in our episode today. People playing people they shouldn't probably be playing.
Yeah.
But welcome, everybody, to the Double-Edged Double Bill, where every week, Adam and I talk about a good and a bad feature we pick at the end of the previous episode related to a topic. And this topic's interesting because it was chosen by our patrons, patreon.com/dedbpod. More on that at the end of the show. But basically, they chose between the highest grossing films of all time, and then the ultimate winner of the Patreon poll was the box office bombs, biggest ones of all time.
Big surpriser that our fucking patrons would stick it to us, you fuckers.
Well, here's the thing. Just because a movie cost a lot and lost a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad movie, Adam.
No, I mean, that's true. I mean, listen to our newest On the Edge of Relevance with the Northman. Yeah, no, it's true. It's just, there are some stinkers in here.
Yeah, we went off of the list of biggest box office bombs that's on Wikipedia for this, just as a rough basis. And there's a lot of interesting ones. Like, I would say the one that kind of fits like perfectly in the middle is the one that's sort of like purportedly the biggest bomb whatsoever adjusted for inflation, John Carter.
More on that later, possibly, but yes.
That's a great example of a movie that got a lot of attention for like, oh my god, big bomb. Like a lot of movies do that. Whenever they bomb horribly, it's like, oh my god, it's the biggest disaster, huge failure. That must mean it's a bad movie. That's not always the case, and it's a shame that stigma's attached to it, even though at the same time, it's fun, especially as a movie nerd, when you see like, oh wow, a movie bombed that horribly, regardless of the quality. It's just fascinating to see something so massive fall so far.
Oh, yeah, no, I totally agree. And to the point to where I make it a point to try to seek out these movies sometimes. Just like, what went wrong? Like, what was so wrong? Was it just on the inflated budget, or is it truly just a piece of crap? I find it always very fascinating.
Yeah. It especially when you see like in a modern day and age where obviously we get bigger and bigger movies all the time because we have the whole thing of like, well, in order for it to like succeed on an international level, it has to be the biggest movie that's ever existed. You get a lot of movies that attempt to kind of like be this big massive success, and not all of them are Marvel level hits necessarily. Even Marvel kind of had that with like an Eternals was the first example for them of like really just bottoming out in terms of a box office reception. At the same time, I think that's where you get a lot of especially the interesting kind of like sliding doors moments in movie history, where it's like, oh, if that movie hadn't been a big bomb, we might have gotten more of like this particular flavor of movie or something. Like a great example of that is like a Titan AE. Like that's a movie that was a massive failure and kind of killed hand-drawn animation on a certain level. Like the sort of lack of success for that one, and also Treasure Planet just really sank hand-drawn animation forever, which is a shame because you would wish maybe if those movies were successful, we'd still get more than just like an occasional Princess and the Frog.
Right. I completely agree. But you also understand too, like, if they put that much money behind like a Titan AE, because I mean, I remember the marketing for that being everywhere and all that.
And that soundtrack really trying very hard, both of them, because one had Goo Goo Dolls and the other one had like Lit and bullshit, like very early 2000s movies.
Right. But you also get it. Like if those die, big, huge flaming deaths, which they both did, it's not smart to try it again, at least quickly. I mean, that's it. You do notice, though, with a lot of box office bombs, something might bomb and not do well, and then maybe, 10 years down the line, they'll try it again. It's really give and take. It really, really is.
Yeah, we'll be talking about, I would argue, one of such an example when we get to our double redo choices, as we're near the end of the show. But we're talking about two specific massive bombs that came out. We have your good pick, we ended up picking last episode, which is The 13th Warrior. And then we had my bad pick, which is Gods of Egypt.
Oh,
We'll go
God.
into a lot of detail on both of those here, but we'll start off with The 13th Warrior.
He was fortunate to have the love of the most beautiful woman in the kingdom. Unfortunately, she was the king's wife, and he was banished forever.
Go with God. You listening?
Now, this man of peace has wandered into a land at war against an enemy that comes without warning and leaves without a trace.
They are demons.
You must know that 13 men have been chosen to destroy this evil.
What the hell are you saying?
The 13th man is you.
The 13th Warrior.
So The 13th Warrior came out August 17th, 1999, which, important to point out in terms of the box office stuff. One, this movie had a budget of, like, depending on who you talk to, like over 100 million, upwards of like 160 million. And it did not do very well when it came out. It ended up making overall $61 million. So that's disastrous.
At best.
At best. And what's interesting is I found out the reason why is this came out within a couple, I think a week or two of The Sixth Sense. When that was the biggest movie possible in 1999. And that was part of it, though. At the same time, this story of basically a Viking legend wouldn't probably be very popular anyway, regardless of The Sixth Sense being a thing.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, it's so funny that you even brought up how close they were to release, because when I still lived at home with my mom and she bought the very first Blu-ray player DVD player
We're going way back, yes.
that we ever
The
had.
Snap cases.
Yep, the very first DVDs we bought, she bought two of them, The Sixth Sense and The 13th Warrior.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
That makes sense. But, Adam, this was your choice. And I'm curious, why don't you first maybe tell people who likely didn't see this movie what this is about, and then go into why you chose it as a good one.
The movie is about this sort of Viking quest to go to this another sort of kingdom in Norway or the Netherlands or wherever the hell it is, to help save this king whose village is being set upon by supposedly supernatural creatures. So, and along for the quest, there's this Arab scholar who was exiled from his land for alluded to maybe having an affair with a royalty. So the reason he has to go is because they go right before they're about to leave, they visit sort of the soothsayer or mystic, and she throws the bones and they all stand up and volunteer, and she gets to the final 13th one, throws the bones, and it has to be someone who's not a Northman to go with them. And just so happens he's there visiting with this sort of group of Vikings, and so he's forced to go with them. And along the way, he bonds with them, and it's also kind of like how he learns to find his own personal strength and how he helps to, sort of save this kingdom and so on and so forth. Swords and violence. The reason I picked it, one, it is the source material, Eaters of the Dead by Michael Crichton, is the first adult book I ever read cover to cover. And I fucking loved it. I loved the book so much. So I was super stoked to see the movie. And I saw it, and I really did enjoy it. Now, I don't know if it's because I read the source material first or not. I'm assuming that might be the case, but I really, really enjoyed the movie. I especially love the cast of Vikings. They are fucking phenomenal. The one who plays like sort of his best friend who guides him steals the movie. The one who plays Bolvi is just a giant fucking, like, when you think of Viking, you're like, oh yeah, that guy's a Viking. I think the action scenes are really well done. I just think it's a really fun movie. Now, I do know there's problems with it being Antonio Banderas playing an Arab. And I get that. Totally legit. It was a problem at the time. It should be an issue. And it is an issue. But I do think, given even that sort of problem, I do think he does the best he can do with the role.
Yeah, we should probably just get that elephant out of the room right away about that. That was sort of the infamous thing about the movie, yeah, was that the character of Ahmad was played by Antonio Banderas, instead of casting an actual actor. Like, they vaguely say, they only really call him an Arab. I think the only real connection we get is that there's at least Omar Sharif is his buddy
Yeah.
in the initial part of the movie. He's obviously Egyptian.
He does Muslim prayers.
Right, yeah, so they established that he is Muslim.
Yeah.
I don't think the casting choice would be maybe as bothersome to me if they didn't have, like, the most famous Middle Eastern actor of all time, fucking Omar Sharif next to him in his introduction.
Yeah. Yeah,
throughout all this.
yeah.
It's a weird, I definitely do not agree with the casting choice of Banderas, even, like, regardless of, like, him not being Arabic, which for the record is the main problem. At the same time, there's the other thing of, I don't think Banderas is great for that role, because that character is supposed to be like this guy who's, like, initially a quiet, timid, sort of, like, poet of sorts who then travels with them and then gains that kind of confidence afterward. Like, the first half of the movie, it's just like, this motherfucker was just Zorro. Like, we know this guy's, like, super confident and brash. You know, so even regardless of, like, the problematic elements, it's a weird casting just because of what we know Banderas as, and he can't shake that Spanish charm that he always has at all.
No.
And I said this, like, on Letterboxd, like, the whiplash of this is the movie he followed up Zorro with. Like, the casting whiplash is so insane. Going from the perfect to the not perfect at all, what the hell are you doing casting choice is mind-boggling. I would say with this movie, I hadn't seen it before, and I haven't read the source material, the Michael Crichton novel. I would say going into it, even without the knowledge of, like, some of the production problems that happened, which inflated the budget, I could tell there's a lot of weird stuff, particularly, like, near the end of the movie with that. And I think the introduction's kind of clunky, but I would say everything from when, like, they actually start going on the quest through at least, like, the big, what should have, I would argue, be the climactic battle sequence is, like, pretty stellar to me. There's some editing problems and stuff, but overall, I think, like, that journey is really fun. I like the cast of Vikings. I like the mythology of this killer that comes. So it's interesting because this is from John McTiernan. There's a lot of moments, like, especially when they go to that village and they see people who have been wounded and you get hints of, like, the mysterious bear creature guys or whatever. It's just like, is this him just doing another fucking Predator movie?
Right,
it's like a lot of him doing another Predator, essentially, in a really fun way, with a lot of those elements. And yeah, I think there's a lot of fun to be had in this movie, but it's very choppy at points. I think particularly the last, I would say, 30 minutes or so has a lot of just like, oh, this is, like, barely put together with Scotch tape.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Like, obviously, I didn't notice that when I first saw it because I was a lot younger. But watching it now, yeah, it can be almost jarring at times. The final sort of bit feels very tacked on.
You guys had your finale in the waterfall thing. That was cool.
That was awesome.
And then they have the fucking, like, oh, we have to have another final battle. Like, wait, what? We're, like, 10 minutes away from the movie. And like, why are we doing this now?
Right. Just to give the Bullseye character, I think, a send-off. That's what it felt like.
Right, even though he was fine because, like, he seemed like he was dying. He died a noble death. And it's like,
right.
We have to have him die another noble death.
right. But you could tell test audience are probably like, that guy's awesome. All right, well, we gotta fucking do something with it.
Well, and also it definitely feels like, because this has been said as much, like, McTiernan had a much longer cut that they severely edited down and then had Michael Crichton come in and direct reshoots and stuff like that. The less interesting, like, very choppy action sequences have Crichton all over it.
You know, the thing is, so again, I think what really sells this movie, obviously, like we said, the sort of supporting cast, but the locations are great. The costuming, set design, all that just works really stellar in this movie. I think, you know, obviously the Banderas of it all is a problem, but I tend to think sort of the production problems maybe is what not necessarily hurt this movie to make it a bomb. I don't think this movie could have ever been really super successful just because of the type of movie it is. And again, going against the Sixth Sense and everything, obviously movie tastes were changing. And that's why, you know, even nowadays, as you can see, even with the Northman and stuff like that, like these sort of sword epic, you know, either Viking movies or even medieval movies that come out, like look at the fucking Robin Hood or the King Arthur movie with Charlie Hunnam and stuff. They just don't make money anymore.
Well, it's a weird thing where there will be one that makes a lot of money and then everyone tries to chase it and never, like, that happens obviously with any trend, but it's definitely the case with, like, Sword and Sandal. It's always like one works and then a bunch of failures. Like, I would say Gladiator, massive success, best picture winner. You had attempts at that to follow that up, and aside from, like, Troy, Most of them failed horribly at the box office. And then 300 in 2007.
Right.
Like the other example of that, where it's just like, oh, this is massive, big. We gotta follow this up with some other like big Sword and Sandal movies, and you get like one of the movies we're gonna talk about today. Quite frankly, has that problem.
Yes.
For a lot of reasons. But yeah, I think that's the thing is the 13th Warrior definitely feels like it's a movie that's maybe more trying to bank off of, say, like Braveheart. I would say it's like the closest comparison at that time. That was like another massive success, big box office winner, a period, big action war drama. And then a lot of people try to follow it up. And this is probably the biggest example of like, we're going to stop that. Because then right after is Gladiator, which is a completely different animal.
Right.
This.
Yeah. Definitely.
It's weird how, like, with McTiernan, that dude had such a fascinating run from, like, not Nomads necessarily, his first movie with Pierce Brosnan no one knows about, but you got Predator, Die Hard, Hunt for Red October, like, that run immediately is just like, oh my god, the next big guy. And then, following that up with, like, Medicine Man and Last Action Hero, another movie, 2 movies we could have talked about, I was like, those are both pretty big bombs. And then doing Die Hard with a Vengeance. And then this year is, he had not just 13th Warrior, but also the Thomas Crown Affair remake, which was actually very successful at that time. Then right after this is Rollerball, Basic, and then he gets arrested like 3 years later, and he hasn't made a movie since.
Oh, God. Rollerball. Jesus. Yeah, but if you were to take 3 movies out of anybody's career and you know, throw Die Hard, Predator, and Hunt for Red October in the mix, you'd be like, oh my god, this guy's a master.
And then on the other side of things, like, oh wait, Rollerball, Basic,
Medicine Man,
and Medicine Man. Just like, what the fuck? How is this guy making work? Like, that's the weird thing about McTiernan is it's either massive, huge success everyone loves, or massive disaster, huge, massive, awful disaster.
Yeah. Which is a shame. Again, like I said, I don't think this movie was ever destined to do well, but I do think it has a reputation where, because it was such a bomb, that people just won't give it a chance. And I get it. I do get it, especially for the people who who won't watch anything that, you know, can be considered problematic, because there is definitely that group, and the Antonio Banderas thing is problematic, sure. But the one thing I will say about it doesn't make it okay, but they do treat the fact that he's Arab and Muslim with respect. It's not like he's bumbling and, you know, so out of place and everything like that.
There's some interviews I saw from around the time where they were very proud of like having somebody who was very openly Muslim as a character, which I agree, that's a step. Doesn't make up for casting Banderas.
No.
That's interesting, and I like elements of that character, like particularly the whole thing where he learns the Viking language just by listening.
Yes.
That's a great sequence. That's such a great example of like that always happens in these movies where it's like, oh, these two people don't speak any kind of the same language, and then learning from. This is one of the better examples of how to do that, where it's just a lot of like Banderas listening attentively, and the way that the mix is between Viking language and English and all this other stuff. It's such a great way of doing that device that helps you advance with the character. Where it's like he just listened to these guys talk and was instantly able to pick up on the language. That's how smart this guy is.
Mm-hmm. And I love the bit where he takes the sword and reshapes it to be, you know, something that he can handle, that he's used to. And I also just love the banter. You know, when you die, can I give that to my daughter? You know, that type of shit. It's really well done. The sort of relationship he has with them, particularly the other guy. I can't ever remember the character's name, but the one who gets involved in sort of the duel to the death with the prince's like bodyguard.
Right, and he's their initial guide when him and Omar Sharif show up at the camp and stuff like that. Yeah.
That's also a great scene, that sort of duel scene. Really well done, really sort of establishes pretty quickly, you know, what they're trying to do and the point they're trying to prove, this sort of group of outsiders in their camp. Like, don't fuck with us. Like, we're here to help you. You know, it's pretty fucking cool. And yeah, the whole descent down into the cave, the waterfall and all, it's so cool and like tense and claustrophobic at points. And I mean, it's just really well done.
So many beheadings.
Oh, yeah, all over the place.
That was the big thing. Just like, oh shit, if you like drank every time a beheading happened, you'd get very wasted. Because there's just like so like most of the deaths in this movie are like massive, awful beheadings that happen. They're really dope. Or even like my favorite sort of like big sequence is like the huge like battle that they have in what should be like the end of Act 2 or end of the like climactic moment, where it's just like they're getting bombarded by these guys, and that's where they find out like, wait, they're just men. They're just men. And with the guys in the bear suits, and they're coming around, and there's that one shot particularly of like they're on what looks like a giant log face, And it's just like one bear guy that comes down, just fucking massacres a guy at the bottom and like falls the fuck over. I get why, like, when you say like, oh, this is such a big massive bomb, like, it's all on the screen. This movie puts its budget right there on screen in a way that's like, it is massive.
Yeah, no, it's a huge movie at scale. I mean, even with the, obviously it doesn't hold up too well, CGI scenes of them on the boat going across the choppy waters and all that stuff. Then you'll have scenes of these giant sets of these big, made Viking boats pulling up to shore with the little boy standing on the edge, and then they'll set them ablaze. And I mean, there's a lot of production value in this.
Yeah, and I even love the way that they're with those like bear suited sort of implied to be creatures initially, and then they find out they're men. I love how they kind of shoot around that to where you're almost just like, is this a weird like bear mutant creature, or is it a man? For a while, like, you don't know until that battle sequence, basically, if they are actually human or not.
Yeah,
and
until the reveal. Yeah, until
right.
Antonio Banderas' character figures it out.
Right, particularly with, I love that whole sequence where they get attacked in like the dark sort of like throne room.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Right, where it's just like them getting mauled and like all this shit is going on. They only have like the one paw basically as they all like dart away. That's a great example of like really obfuscating what's going on.
And how terrifying the moment is too, where it's like, where are the ones there's the ones we killed? They take their dead with them and stuff. Like, it's such a cool thing where you're like, oh God, what are they up against? Like, it almost feels like it's a take on the Beowulf legend at points.
That was apparently the basis for Crichton with like Eaters of the Dead.
I mean, it had to have, right? 100%.
Yes.
I mean, to the point where the main Viking's name is Bolvi. I mean, it's right there. But it's just such a cool idea. And it's just, like I said, it's very unfortunate, the production disaster behind it, the choppy editing and the Banderas of it all, because I think if not, I think this movie would definitely be sort of a cult classic. And it's not that. I mean, and I hate to use that term, cult classic, but maybe a rediscovered gem. And it's not that. And I don't think it ever will be that. Unfortunately, I think this is one that's sort of lost to time.
Yeah, I would generally agree with that, where I liked this movie, but I definitely see like all the rough edges. This is definitely an example where, even though post Justice League, like, it seems gauche to be like, oh, release the different cut of this that doesn't exist. That's the original director's vision. But I'd be genuinely interested to see like what that like over 2 hour, like 2.5 hour long version that McTiernan would have done would have been. Probably maybe not even a great movie. It's still like the Banderas casting alone makes it like, I don't think you'd ever make this a great movie, but I think if you get a more like grand scale epic giant movie as opposed to this more compromised and watchable movie, but one I get why it's just kind of gotten lost to the shuffle.
I understand why this movie didn't do well. I understand why it's still not remembered or even watched or talked about, but it's just kind of one of those where anybody who hasn't seen it, who might be into these type movies, I'm always like, yeah, maybe check out 13th Warrior. You might like it. And the thing is, I've never recommended to somebody who came back was like, that movie fucking sucked. I've gotten either, yeah, that was all right, that was pretty good, better. Mostly you get better than I expected, but I've had a couple people like, that was actually really fucking good. So it's just one of those movies, man. I mean, I like it. It's got a special place in my heart. Like I said, because of the book and everything else, but I'm not sort of like, I don't get it. Like, I totally understand.
I just think that this is definitely a movie where it would create a classic example of like one of these big bombs, because like I mentioned, it was originally set at $85 million production budget, and then it kind of went up to 100 during shooting. So it's like, okay, you would have lost money if it made that like $60 million either way. But then that studio thing of just like, oh, we gotta fix it, throw more money, we gotta fix it. Fix it. Like, that never works. Even down to, like, there was a whole thing where apparently, like, the main sort of Viking actor was talking about, they shot this originally in 1997. That was the original principal photography, was 97. It's supposed to come out in 98. But in 98, they were doing reshoots literally where, like, for a couple months, they'd have a reshoot with McTiernan, then, like, a break, and then reshoots with Crichton, like, right afterward. That's insane.
That's insane.
Right, and they were just like, oh, don't care about what the other guy did or whatever, and it just feels like I like, obviously Michael Crichton created some, like, massive, huge things in book form and also directed some interesting movies that were, we've talked about Westworld on the Patreon, stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of, like, interesting, creative vision from him and McTiernan, given, like, all the movies he did, but, like, when you try and have, like, these clashing visions fix a movie, it's like, guys, you should have just gone with like your initial loss. You would have lost like, I don't know, 40 million as opposed to 130 million.
Right.
You should have just kept it at that same fucking boat.
I'm all down for polishing edges and stuff that need to be polished, but to go back and do these expansive reshoots, I mean, Unless you're a Marvel movie, it never works. Most of the time. Anytime you hear a movie has to go back for extensive reshoots, you know there's trouble.
Right, and to be fair, like, reshoots are built into the budget in general for a movie. Like, usually they do, like, a couple weeks where it's like, oh, we missed this shot, let's shoot this, or whatever. That's always there, but when it's like, oh, hey, we're gonna have 2 directors doing dueling fucking reshoots, that's a very bad sign.
That's a horrible sign. Horrible sign. I mean, the movie was destined to fail.
Yeah, even down to, they replaced the score. Like, it was originally Graham Revell, and then they had a completely new score from Jerry Goldsmith. Which that's even happened a lot where it's the other way around, where Jerry Goldsmith has recorded many scores that were never used in movies because they replaced, because that's how deep they're into it. Just like, oh fuck, we gotta completely replace the score. It's like, guys, you're trying to fix something that's already leaking. You're making a bigger hole.
Yeah. Like it gets to the point to where they know it doesn't work. It's not working. So we might as well just try to retool everything because we don't know exactly what the problem is. So let's just change everything. And never a good sign.
Right. To the degree that, like, it gets, that kind of reputation around it, even to the degree of Omar Sharif himself, this is a quote from him talking about the movie, that basically it made him quit acting for a bit, where he said, quote, "After my small role in The 13th Warrior, I said to myself, let us stop this nonsense, these meal tickets that we do because it pays well. I thought, unless I find a stupendous film that I love, and that makes me want to leave home to do, I will stop."
That's horrible.
This dude was Lawrence of Arabia, so him saying that is just like, wow. Oh,
I mean, it's Omar Sharif. He's fucking acting royalty.
Yes.
Oops. I might have done something wrong here.
But yeah, I mean, and you can also tell, like, he was only in that 1/3 of the movie, so I'm sure he's just like, hey, Omar, let's do some reshoots. Like, fuck you. I'm not doing that.
1/3 is even being very generous.
That's true, right.
I mean, he's in fucking 15 minutes of this thing at best. Right.
Yes, and then he's just like, goodbye, Antonio, goodbye.
Yep, see you later. Enjoy your journey.
Like, I expected, like, is he going to go back to Omar Sharif? Just like, no, he ain't there.
Nope, he's gone.
See that fucker again.
Nope.
No. For sure on that. But yeah, let's go ahead and go into final thoughts then on the 13th Warrior. Adam, any final thoughts on the 13th Warrior?
Like I said, I think it's a fine movie. There are problems with it, be it with casting and sort of editing and a few other things. But I think it's still fun. I don't think anybody would, at least I would hope no one would come out of this and be like, that is the worst fucking thing I've ever seen, because there are far worse. Stay tuned. Again, I get why it flopped. I get why it's not remembered. But I just think if you are interested in these type of movies, or even interested in the idea of box office bomb movies or anything like that, I mean, you could do a lot worse than 13th Warrior. I think it's fun.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I didn't love it necessarily. I think it's definitely a movie where it's, like, we've talked about frustrating movies where it's like you watch, it's like, oh, I could see the great movie this could be. And that's a bit with this movie, but at the same time, it still is, like, very watchable, very enjoyable, despite some of the elements around it that are awkward with the casting and such. But at the same time, it is still, like, it's very watchable. It has some, like, really well done sequences that are, like, really fun. I could see this being, like, a movie that cable companies bought for cheap. And they're just like, fuck it, let's run the 13th Warrior on TV. It only eats up like an hour, 45 minutes.
That happened.
I'm sure it did, yeah.
This shit used to play on TNT all the time.
That was a big thing with any of these, like, box office bombs, was just like they had to recuperate somehow, so it's like fucking sell off the TV rights for cheap.
Yep.
And just have, like, TNT or fucking TBS play it for, like, years and years. I'm sure that was the case with this one. But yeah, as it stands, like, I think it's enjoyable. Like, I can see the much better movie that's in there. And unfortunately, I think if nothing else, it's a really fascinating study in, like, what a disaster box office, like, movie can ultimately be, which is to say, like, they're not always, like, the worst movies ever made, or they're not always the biggest underrated gems of all time. Why did we let this flop? It's a movie where I get why it failed. It's not nearly as bad as people said it was, but ultimately, it deserves maybe at least a bit more attention. It's like, this is fun. It doesn't take up a lot of your time. It's only an hour, like, 40 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's really lean. It's very, very lean. But a movie that's not very lean at all, much more maximalist even than this movie, is Gods of Egypt.
Ages have passed since the gods walked among us. Before the fury swept over our land. Before the war.
So how do we stop him? Try to keep up.
You know what's waiting. Set has an army behind him.
Bow before me or die. I won't make that mistake.
So, Gods of Egypt came out February 26, 2016, from director Alex Proyas, who we've talked about on the show in terms of you're a big fan of Dark City, Adam, and we talked about the original Crow, which were like the two big movies that got him started. And, you know, after that, he did some stuff like I, Robot and Knowing, and then that ultimately got us to Gods of Egypt, which is the most recent theatrical film he's done. He hasn't done anything since. I wonder why.
Big shocker. Whoa, what?
Right. And this movie cost $140 million and made $150, which some may say, oh, it made back its budget. But for a movie like this, that's extremely expensive and has a lot of advertising behind it, you want to make at least like 2.5 times the budget.
Yeah, at least double.
Right, to cover that, as opposed to this movie did not do that, and thus it lost about $90 million for the studio. Even though they were trying really hard. Like, there was a great, like, interview where Proyas is talking about, like, oh, we want this to be the start of a franchise. Like, a big, massive franchise. And this movie has that all over it. So much like, we're building up, like, this is our universe and everything. It's the story of a bunch of Egyptian gods. Like, you got Nikolai Coster-Waldau as Horus. A real Egyptian god.
Just the fucking... That name in front of as Horus is the most... Keep going, though, because there's a lot more of that.
He was about to become king of Egypt, so sort of like the main god after his father retires. But while they're at the big crowning ceremony, his evil uncle, Set, played by Gerard Butler, comes in and stages a surprising coup where he becomes the leader of Egypt, and he takes away the glowing magical eyes of Nikolai Coster-Waldau. Thus, he is like sort of banished off, and we mainly follow this one fucking human played by Brendan Thwaites, who was a young white actor that they were trying really hard to sell.
Oh man, they tried to push that kid so hard. There was the Pirates movie, Maleficent. They really were trying, man, and then they gave him fucking Titans, and like, here you go, you can have this. His name is Beck, B-E-K.
Right. It's just like, oh man, are you going to start singing Loser?
Oh god, I wish.
Well, no, instead he's going to sing a fucking song from Aladdin, because he's literally Aladdin at the opening of the movie.
He's Aladdin.
He's about to sing like, one jump, hair of the breadline.
No,
he's about
1,000%. He's this good-looking thief on the streets of Egypt.
Right, he's in love with this one girl of his, and he's just like, oh, I'm going to marry her and all this stuff. And he kicks off the plot, because after, Set takes over and enslaves a bunch of the humans, Brendan Thwaites tries to still see his lady love, Zaya, played by Courtney Eaton, and they get caught trying to have their little love affair, and thus she is killed in their escape in one of the funniest fucking things, her death scene.
By Rufus Sewell.
Right, who is her master. When she ends up dying and she goes on the journey through the afterlife, he is like, oh, please, Horus, you have to save her. You have to help me save her somehow. It's just like, well, I mean, if you give me my eye back, then I can probably help you out, and maybe we can find some way to get her back from the afterlife. And they meet a bunch of other characters along the way, other big Egyptian gods. And I should emphasize big, because one of the many weird decisions the movie makes is that all of the Egyptian gods are like 10 feet tall.
Yep. And they have gold blood.
Right, and they have gold blood, stuff like that. This movie, I will give credit to, is very ambitious in terms of what it wants to do with like building this universe based on old Egyptian mythology and stuff like that. It's trying really hard to make that this like big, grand, epic scale. And I think the weird thing with this movie is whenever it doesn't focus on more than one human being in the central part of the frame, I think it looks gorgeous, but then a human moves around, and it looks like shit.
It's so ugly. It is so
fucking
ugly.
Awful.
Awful.
Like, the compositing in this movie is some of the worst I've ever seen in a movie that cost, once again, $140 million fucking dollars.
I mean, and the thing is, before and since.
Mhm.
Like, even movies that were doing digital compositing 10 years before this movie came out look more legit than this. I mean, it is awful. Awful, awful.
To the degree that it makes that sort of like scale thing change from like shot to shot.
Yep.
Particularly the opening sort of like big coup scene in the fight between Nikolai Coster-Waldau and Gerard Butler. Gerard Butler at one point is like human sized.
Yep.
And he like flattens Nikolai Coster-Waldau. That happens a lot.
Uh-huh. There's many times where Brendan Thwaites will be standing next to Nikolai, whatever, what is the fucking Game of Thrones?
Jamie Lannister. Jamie Lannister, let's call him.
Yeah. And he'll be like chest height to him, and then the next thing he's like the top of his head is at his belly button. Like, it's constant. It's constant. And, you know, because I feel like this is a movie we're just going to be like, what the fuck and why the whole time? Like, it's very hard to dissect this movie because it is a very what the fuck did I just watch sort of movie. I have to be honest and say that Chadwick Boseman gives one of the oddest performances I might have ever seen in a film. It is so bizarre, such a weird, muddled accent and cadence of speaking. Like, I don't think he wants to be there, and I think that's evident. Like, I think he, like, because that actually, to be true, is with a lot of the actors in this movie. They're probably like, oh, what the fuck did we do? I don't think he wants to be there, and clearly Jeffrey Rush has no interest in what is happening.
No, yeah, I think what I find interesting about Boseman and Rush is I would agree they don't have as much interest, but I would say them doing like the weird shtick that they're doing is much more interesting than like with Jamie Lannister. It's just this big problem of like he's trying to be like an action hero in this movie.
Oh, dude, and it does not work. It falls so flat.
And even the same thing with like Gerard Butler is trying to be like, oh, I'm a hammy villain, but like it doesn't feel like hammy in like the fun way. It doesn't feel like it's like a Clash of the Titans kind of thing where that would be like really fun to see.
They don't let him do it enough. He's not on screen enough. Like, Gerard Butler doesn't have as much screen time as he should. He should be on screen a lot more and really hamming it up and being crazy. Like, even Rufus Sewell, who, you know, Rufus Sewell is at least being incredibly hammy in this movie.
Right.
Like, it's not good. I'm not saying it's good. It's not a good performance. But at least he's like being silly and just taking it, you know, on the chin and being goofy. I would say Boseman and Rush is more disinterest, but I think most everyone else in is taking it way too seriously, especially fucking Lannister and Brendan Thwaites. Like, they're really fucking treating this like it's gonna be something. And it's like this movie, it's terrible. The effects are terrible and everything, but I'd argue this movie would have a little bit of charm if everybody was hamming it up and really just sort of having fun. And I don't think anybody in this is having a good time.
No, yeah, I think what works about, like, say, Boseman and Rush is the fact that they are the ones who feel the most like gods in terms of their very big performances, but also they can't be bothered with this, like, big magical adventure. That's what the fun would be of, like, oh, you're hanging out with, like, a bunch of, like, Egyptian gods who are, like, above humanity. It's like, I have no interest in your petty human ideals.
We didn't say that Jeffrey Rush plays Ra, the sun god.
Yes, he does play it. Which we didn't even really say this. Like, we talked about this a lot with 13th Warrior, but this movie got a lot of flack for the fact that not a single Egyptian actor in it.
Brian Brown plays Osiris, Jeffrey Rush's son and Gerard Butler's brother.
It's so weird, yeah. But, like, one, you should have cast actual fucking Egyptian actors, and especially as, like, the Brendan Thwaites part. It's like, just get, like, I don't know, Rami Malek or whatever. Anybody who's an Egyptian, but also, like, it would be probably one thing if, like, okay, I could see maybe not casting them all the gods as Egyptian, but when you have, like, 90% white guys, and then just fucking Chadwick Boseman, like, hey.
Yeah, and then the African American female, too, the one who's, like, the snake god or whatever.
Right, that's true. Yes. When you have, like, those are the two literal tokens, basically.
Yep.
And it's mostly all these white people. It's just like, guys, come on. At least, like, a diverse cast, even if not an all-Egyptian cast. Come on.
Anything, dude. Anything.
Right.
Well, you know what? You know, hot take, Hollywood whitewashes. I'm sorry. I don't want to throw that out there. No, I know. I'm sorry.
Adam, how can I ever watch the last Airbender movie again? That's the real question. I don't know how I can possibly do that for a lot of reasons.
What are you talking about? You don't want to watch that again? But why has got to be just white guys? It's so ridiculous to me.
And it's so uncreative and visually bland.
It's so bland and uncreative. Like, you don't even try to get anybody of color other than, like you said, and I hate that term, but it's true, the two tokens. But no, you get fucking Lannister and Gerard Butler. Well, I love Gerard Butler. I really do. But good God.
At the same time, like, even if you want to remove that, just like, oh, but isn't it a fun movie? Like, this movie is so, like, I like so many of the like I said, some of the visual elements of it. I think I like how, like, some of these creatures look when they're animated. Like, honestly, watching this, I'm just like, if this wasn't a fully animated movie where you didn't even have, like, fucking live action humans in it, it would at least be, like, 50% more watchable than it is.
I mean, at best. But the thing is, even when, like, they turn into their, animals or whatever, it looks bad. It looks terrible. And they're, like, robotic, mechanical, like, weird. Like, what is happening here? Like, that's the thing. Like, what is going on? Like, why couldn't he just turn into a giant hawk? And Set turned into a giant jackal? Why has it got to be this weird thing? Like, it's so, there's so many, like, choices that were made here that all should have been the opposite idea. Like, it just doesn't work.
But I think the problem is that, like, we've talked about this many times on the show, especially with bad choices, where I'm like, oh, they're doing odd choices. I'm usually a big defender of those kind of movies.
Sure.
Like, they are doing weird, bizarre, crazy things. The problem is that they have some of that visually with some of these things. Like, I think the opening sort of 10 minutes or so where it's like Jamie Lannister gets betrayed and he turns into a gold guy and fucking Gerard Butler turns into a dog man and stuff like that. Like, that's kind of fun, but the problem is that, like, as the movie goes along, it becomes less of, like, that gonzo kind of fun energy you get out of something like a Jupiter Ascending, and you get more of, like, this is trying to be a blockbuster with, like, some of the worst, like, back and forth patter. It was just like, oh man, I think they literally said, like, we got company and bullshit like that. It is written like the hackiest blockbuster script possible.
Yeah, it totally is.
Right.
And the CGI sort of fight scenes where they're flying around, especially at the end, is so A, phony looking, B, hard to even tell what the hell is going on because it's so muddy at points. And C, do you give a shit?
Right, yeah. The waterfall scene in particular, that fight sequence with, like, the dog guys coming in, it looks just like, oh man, this is like a bad Sega CD level integration of a person into a CG backdrop. It's just, like, really fucking terrible looking. And the thing is, like, the few scenes where I kind of find some fun in them are really when it's like...
You're reaching. I can already tell.
Well, because you mentioned, like, the Chadwick Boseman character, like, the sequence where, like, they go to his hideaway and, like, his whole powers, like, duplicates himself multiple times. And
right, they're all reading different books and everything to bring up his intelligence. Pretty cool.
Right, and that's like, and he's, like, trying to seek knowledge. Like, that whole sequence is much more interesting to me because it's actually going into the idea of, like, oh, what is it to be, like, a god that exists amongst humans and stuff like that. And you see this guy, like, his only thing is, like, I have to duplicate myself and create, like, so many different versions of myself so I can seek this knowledge, and he's, like, complete disinterest in the big adventure and whatnot. That's a fun idea for a character.
Sure.
And I like that little introduction scene. The trouble is, then he gets roped into it, and he becomes so much more just like, oh, I'm the smart guy on the group.
I'm kind of the quirky one.
Right.
But then juxtaposed, so you got Elodie Young, who I really do like as an actress. In this, she's just like, isn't she pretty?
Right, she's pretty, and she's just like, oh, I gotta, like, help out, once again, this fucking little human dude who we don't care about. Because
he believes in true love, who you do not, you do not care about. By the end of the movie, when he's, like, dies, spoiler alert, when he dies and Horace is all upset, you're like, wait, what? This is so, like, no, you don't give a shit about this kid. Like, stop it.
Right, honestly, I would rather have more fun watching fucking Jeffrey Rush on his spaceship on top of flat Earth. Like, just being, once again, another disinterested god. Like, the scene where, like, they try and encounter him and just like, hey, can you help us out? It's just like, I have no interest in this now. If you'll excuse me, I have to shoot my giant space dune worm.
For some reason, I have a forehead prosthetic.
Right, and also a weird ponytail on the back.
Oh my god, what the hell?
Like, if we had more of that kind of weirdness that was, like, sort of the distance of gods versus humanity, I think it'd have a lot more fun with it, but then we have to go right back into some of the most cliche, like, blockbuster back and forth pattern. It's just, like, so dull to me.
Terrible. I mean, just even the Rufus Sewell stuff with him and Brendan Thwaites on that elevator up to Obelisk. Oh, she was pretty, such soft skin. Oh my god, okay, we got it. It's just the most cliche, stereotypical bullshit ever. I mean, ever. There's a lot of it. Like you said, it comes across like, all the lines people make fun of in action movies. Like you even said, like, oh, we got company. It seems like they took all of those, like these ones are the ones people like. Let's put that all in here.
It's a movie that wants to have like those big, like elaborate, crazy designs, but it's also like, but we have to make a commercial at the same time. Like if this was more in the vein of, like I mentioned, Jupiter Ascending, where that's a very sincere, heartfelt, bizarre movie that would have never been commercial. It was a massive bomb, but you can feel the sincerity coming out of the Wachowskis, where it's like, well, at least I respect this.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I don't like the movie. Well, let's be clear. I do not like Jupiter Ascending, but I respect it for what they tried to do.
Right, versus this is not at all a sincere movie. This is cold and calculated.
This is 100%. We're going to make a ton of money on this and get a sequel. This was exactly that. Like, we're going to build a franchise with this. We don't really know what it is or care what it is, but it's crazy, so here you go.
They literally tried to make Egyptian like mythology into like Marvel superhero stuff.
1,000%. They transform into being Iron Man, and they all have superpowers, and they all, get
and
these
the
crazy
one-liners.
fights. Yeah, the quippy one-liners, and there's these big CGI fights where the powers are the same. I mean, it's atrocious.
The one bit where like Jamie Lannister tries to aim his spear, and it's just like, oh, you gotta throw it. It's just like, my eyesight is what it used to be. Get it? Adam, I don't know if you got it. Let me reiterate. So.
Wait, no, yeah, wait. Now, what happened? Okay, why?
So his eyesight was what it used to be because he
all
has
right.
not 2 eyes, not 0 eyes,
okay,
but just 1 eye. Right?
Oh my God! Now I got it. Redeems the whole movie.
Right.
Holy shit! Oh, you got me there. Oh man.
It's 10 out of 10. Gods of Egypt. Why did it bomb so badly? It should have been a massive.
I don't know. I don't know. Like, it's great. It is something. Look, I watched this last night. I fell asleep twice in my uncomfortable ass computer chair. Sat up, woke myself up, like, all right, I'm good. I gotta watch this. Rewound it. Fell asleep again. Woke up. Holy fuck, what's going on? Jumped in the shower to wake up. Came, finished it, and then hated myself. Because then I got an adrenaline burst, and I'm like, oh, great, now I'm up till 4 a.m. Like, I don't know that I would call this one of those forgettable bad movies, because I don't think it is that. But this is definitely one of the worst ones we've done for the show.
The big thing I would say about this is, like I mentioned earlier, this is one of the more cynical products we've done for the show, as opposed to, like, genuinely like terrible movies where you feel some investment from people that are going on. This feels so bizarrely calculated in a way where it's just like, oh, we want to make this commercial but also do extravagant fun designs. It wants to have its cake and eat its too kind of thing, to a degree that feels so cynical and cold and not at all like an enjoyable train wreck of a movie. This is just kind of like a dull one.
Yeah, it's dull. It's boring. Like, it's boring. Mm-hmm. And a movie like this that looks like this and has this sort of action sort of idea behind it, and the sets and the good looking cast and all that.
Once again, I'll reiterate this. Ra is on a big fucking spaceship that's above a literal flat Earth where he is shooting a worm dude.
That has the sun chained to it.
Yep.
So he's pulling the sun around flat Earth.
Like, you describe that to me, I'm like, that sounds interesting.
That sounds crazy. What the fuck?
Right.
Wait, he's fighting a Lovecraftian monster at the end? Wow. Or it's a dune sandworm? Yeah, let's check that out. Great. No, don't do it.
Especially like when they come back to it and like Gerard Butler fights him, it's very dull and very boring.
Yeah, and the movie breaks its own rules constantly. Oh, the living are not allowed to speak to the dead. Then he goes down there and talks to her, and all the judges are sitting there and don't give a shit. Like, it's like, what is happening?
And that's another thing also, is that like a lot of, when it's not doing the like quippy one-liners, it's a lot of like exposition that contradicts other exposition that we've heard before. It's very like, so wait, well, I'm following this, I can't, what's happening, what's going on? And it's like, well, maybe the crazy can distract me from how like inconsistent this world is. Not really. No. So it's nothing for nobody.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Yep. Anything else to add to that as a final thought, Adam, for Gods of Egypt?
I mean, it's just bullshit. I mean, the movie's bullshit. Like, I would never, in any circumstance, watch this movie again, ever.
Yeah. I mean, I'll agree with like all the sentiments we've had before, but I will also add just like to that whitewashing element of it that it was obviously criticized so much for that, and like I'm almost glad they didn't do the like huge diverse cast or actually have Egyptians in here, because that would have sunk any attempt to actually have like Egyptian actors, like a more diverse cast than anything in bigger movies.
Yeah,
But
that's a
I'm
really
almost
good
glad that like you didn't sully other actors of color beyond the ones that are in here with this bullshit, this like massive turd of a movie that would not have been like, even if you had cast those other actors who were more appropriate for it, it wouldn't have been improved that much by it, unfortunately, because this is still a dire, dull, boring movie that has some interesting visual flair on occasion, but is ultimately just like such a waste of time and would have been a waste of much more talented people that could have been cast in here. And I'm glad that they weren't bothered with this bullshit.
Yeah, good for them.
Good for them. Now cast them in other movies, Hollywood.
Yeah,
Do that.
do that. That's good.
Well, now, Adam, it's time we do our weekly segment, the Double Redo.
Yeah.
Double Redo.
Double redo.
Double Redo. Double Redo.
Double redo. Double redo.
That works. So the Double Redo is a segment we do every week where, related to the topic that we're talking about, we recommend and don't recommend a movie each. So Adam and I each have a good and a bad pick related to the massive box office bombs topic here. And I'll start with mine. My good pick, I mentioned them earlier in terms of they make these big, hard-in-their-sleeve, sincere movies. I have the Wachowskis' Speed Racer from 2008, which was a movie that really bombed horribly. It came out within weeks of Iron Man being a massive success, and that kind of just showed you the trajectory of Hollywood from there, that this movie failed spectacularly while the Marvel Cinematic Universe train kept it rolling and is still rolling to this day, which I think is a shame because Speed Racer admittingly was a movie I saw around the time it came out, not in theaters, much like most people out there, and I was like, I don't know if I really am digging into it, but then when I revisited a lot of the Wachowski films a couple of years ago, this movie really shut up for me. It is a very fun example of doing like a live action cartoon. It's so rare you get like a good version of that these days, and I love what the Wachowskis do with this movie, where they take the Speed Racer dub in particular from like the 60s and just throw this like big live action movie full of great colors and over the top like racing sequences, but fill it with a lot of sincerity to where you're invested in this little ragtag family with like John Goodman, Christina Ricci, Susan Sarandon. Even Speed is played by Emil Hirsch, not a great guy, but he works fine as like the main character there. And there's just like so much bizarre fun craft that kind of reminds me of like what I love about older cartoons at their best. Like this movie has that so much and has like so much fun, colorful, sprightly imagery throughout. It's a very fun movie. I think it deserves a lot more love than it got at the time. But on the contrasting side of that, I have the bad pick, which is Jack Frost. No, not the 1990s slasher film comedy. I have the 1990s family fantasy drama starring Michael Keaton, where basically this follows him as a traveling blues musician. Yep. He's playing Blues Traveler and like with a fucking harmonica at the beginning.
It's like Ryan Phillippe with a saxophone.
Sure, of course. No, I totally believe that he can play harmonica. Of course,
Yeah.
Michael Keaton.
Yeah, sure.
But he dies in a car accident, and he's been distant from his family before that. But then a year later, on Christmas, he gets resurrected in the form of the snowman that his son builds outside his house. And so from there, it's an adventure with like the son palling around with this snowman. And this was a movie I saw in theaters as a kid. The movie itself, bad 90s fantasy kids movie, whatever. It's a bad movie. But I found out the big reason it cost so much money was obviously all the stuff with the snowman, who was mostly a practical thing or like CG on occasion. But the big thing was they originally hired George Clooney to play the part of Jack Frost, the snowman. So they were going to originally have him do that and do like all the voice stuff. So the snowman is modeled after Clooney.
Oh, it's so obvious too.
It's so like the down to like the brow is very Clooney-esque, but he quit last second. So then you have Michael Keaton talking out of the snowman, and it's the most surreal, bizarre thing.
It's so weird.
Just like George Clooney snowman talking with like the Michael Keaton voice. It's bizarre, and it's a very bad movie that is only interesting just because of the weird conflicting thing between the 1997 horror comedy movie and this bad family movie. And for the record, both of them are terrible movies. Both of them very awful bad movies.
Yep. 1997 one stars Shannon Elizabeth. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. And they do some horrible things with that character.
Absolutely terrible. I've seen both of yours, Speed Racer. It's fine. I'm not as big on it as you are. I never was, but after rewatching it with you, actually,
Yes.
I like it enough. There's a lot of good fun moments to it. Visually, it's fucking incredible. But there's some good bits. John Goodman and Susan Sarandon are fucking amazing in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fun. I'll put it like that. It is fun. Matthew Fox is a wet blanket, like always. But yeah, okay. Look, it's better than I gave it credit for. That's about as far as I'll go with that. But okay. Jack Frost is a nightmare fuel. 1,000%. It's scarier than the 97 horror one. Like, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. The George Clooney snowman is the scariest thing in the world. Like, that movie is fucking. What is happening here? That's a absolutely terrible film, and no.
Well, Adam, I'm gonna say yes to your choices.
Yes. For my good, I have the aforementioned earlier in the show, John Carter. I think John Carter is super, super fun. As much as I think the lead can be a very, very sort of bland actor, and he is, I think he's fine in this. I just think it's a really cool sci-fi movie. I think one of the biggest disservices Disney did is calling it John Carter instead of John Carter of Mars. I know that sounds crazy, but the title John Carter of Mars would make people a little bit more fascinating than just John Carter. And plus, that's the name of the original beloved source material, everything like that. Why not just call it that?
And they even call him that by the end of the movie.
Yeah, why not just call the movie John Carter of Mars? I mean, what a cool title. Still, though, it is a little long, but even then, though, it doesn't deserve the hate it gets. For people to lump this in with like the Lone Ranger is insane to me, because John Carter is infinitely more fun, where the Lone Ranger is just a fucking mess all over the place. Talk about another, instance of improper casting. And then for my bad, which also has a bit of improper casting, I have 47 Ronin. 47 Ronin, it looks amazing. Like the movie, the colors, the costume design, everything. I mean, it is gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. But that's the only thing it has going for it. The rest is just a slog and a bore fest to get through, unfortunately, because it could be a really, really cool movie. Another problem with 47 Ronin is the marketing. They promised a lot more than was delivered in the movie, particularly with the skull guy who's tattooed. Looks like he's got a huge part of the movie. He's in it for 2 seconds. It falls flat on so many levels that even the sort of action bits and the sword fighting and all that is just a CGI mess. And it's really unfortunate, because there was a lot of potential with this one. Like I said, especially with the costume design, the color palette that's chosen, even the cinematography, the score, most of it works. It's just the action bits fall flat, and that isn't something you probably don't want in a samurai epic.
Yeah, I have not seen 47 Ronin, though I heard about, like, that's another sort of, like, 13th Warrior example, where they shot a completely different movie, and they put so much money into reshoots to try and make it more commercial, and it didn't fucking work for them, obviously, because of how much that movie massively failed. I have seen John Carter, though. I also saw John Carter in a theater, and I was, like, it's fascinating with that movie because it's based on the old Edgar Rice Burroughs novels, and I think that movie, even if it wasn't as massively expensive as it was, had the pretty big hill of they are making a movie in 2012 based on literally at that point like 100-year-old book that influenced all of this like big science fiction fantasy that came after it.
And honestly, to throw in a Confederate soldier.
Right, that's true. There's also that. Shocker, Edgar Rice Burroughs, the guy who made Tarzan, not the most culturally sensitive person.
What?
I know. I'm sorry, Adam. I gotta sit you down about this. All 500 of your Tarzan novels you read all the time.
Son of a bitch. Fuck you, Phil Collins.
But yeah, I think that was like an uphill battle no matter what. Was making like, because John Carter, that was one of those where like huge production to like various different versions that had been tried to be made. That there was like an animated one that was trying to be made in like the 50s, I think, and then different other attempts that just never really crystallized into anything. As opposed to like when we ultimately got John Carter, I agree that movie's fun and it's watchable, but I remember even around the time, like friends of mine who had seen it were just like, oh, it just feels like Star Wars. And it's like, well, this is like the movie based on the book that influenced Star Wars, basically.
Right.
So it was always going to have that trouble, I think. That would not make it necessarily very commercial, but still, it's fun. And it's honestly a shame that like that was made by Andrew Stanton, which was he was like a big Pixar guy, made like Finding Nemo and A Bug's Life and other things like that. And that was his attempt to be like a big live action director. And then that failed so hard that's like, Finding Dory, everybody.
Yep.
Let's go right back to that well. Which is a shame, Gus. But yeah, it's a very interesting movie, and I get though at the same time why that lost so much money. Yeah, but let's repeat our titles for everybody here. For my a good one, I had Speed Racer, and for my bad one, I had Jack Frost (parentheses 1998).
Yeah, you got to do that. For my good one, I had John Carter, should have been called John Carter or Mars. And my bad one, I had 47 Ronin.
Yes, so those are our titles. Please submit yours to the various places where we accept feedback and such that we'll mention as we do the close for our show, though keep in mind we'll be doing our picking at the very end for next week, so stay tuned for that. Though first we gotta thank some people like Chris Oliver for the intro and outro music used in our show. Listen to more of his music at chrisoliver.bandcamp.com. Thanks to Christian Thor Lally for our artwork. Follow him at Night of Water. That's night with a K _of_water on Twitter and other places for all his great stuff. And thanks of course to our loyal Patreon subscribers, patreon.com/DEDBpod, where for just $1 a month, you all get to choose movies that we cover for the show or topics like this particular topic that we're covering today. So thank you very much, patrons, for choosing that, and then leading us to that fun discussion we had with those two movies. And you also get to listen to bonus podcasts we put out, like this past month we put out a commentary for Punisher Warzone. We recorded in person a couple months ago, and then also an On the Edge of Relevance where we talked about The Northman.
Yeah!
Yes, and you get that and a whole catalog, like over 2 years worth of fun stuff for just $1.
Yeah, there's a ton of shit out there. I mean, you know, the patrons we got, I love you guys. Thank you so much for doing it. Turn some more people on to us. Rafe Telsh, I don't know that, you know, we need you anymore, but we, you know, we'll still take the dollar. We'll still take the dollar. But
no, we need and love and appreciate the dollar.
I appreciate and love everybody else's dollar.
His money is good here. We do accept his credits for our Patreon.
Man, we might have to have a meeting.
We have these meetings all the time, folks. It's a bit rough. But for more of us, please find us on Twitter and Facebook at DEDBpod, and also submit feedback and double review choices, all sorts of stuff to either there or our email, doubleedgedoublebill@gmail.com, all spelled out. And for more of my antics, find me on Twitter and letterboxes at NotTheWho'sTommy. I also do some writing at marianithomas.wordpress.com and film-cred.com.
And you can find me bounce around the internet on Instagram or Facebook. On Instagram, it's Atom or Adam, ATOM_OR_ADAM. And on Facebook, it's my full name, Adam Thomas. It's private, but send me a request. Say that you're a fan of the show, and I will. I'll definitely add you, because why the hell not? And then you can find me on Letterboxd at Schwanson. That's SCHWANDTSON.
Yes, and for more of our audio antics, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other podcasting platforms. If you're listening on Talk Film Society, why listen to all the other great shows on the network? Or also go to our Podbean main feed for our full archives with a bunch of stuff we recorded long before we joined Talk Film Society. And nothing else, if you can't support us on the Patreon, that's cool, money can be tight, but the totally free way to help us out is just to simply rate, review, or share the show around, because that gets us more visibility.
Yeah, it costs you nothing, so what the fuck? Why are we sandbagging on this? Just get it done.
Get it done. Just do it.
Just fucking
Us
get it
gods
done.
have no time for your foolish mortal needs except for you to share our basking wealth. Yes, please, share it around. Let everyone know who we are.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Adam, god of who gives a fuck, whatever.
Yep. God of South Boston. Hey, what the fuck, you prick, you?
All right, Adam, we gotta do our picking for next week here, because we're at the end of the show, and every week, if you're new, at the very end, Adam and I each pick between the other's choices. I have 2 good choices for next week's show. Adam has 2 bad ones, and we assign each of our choices number between 1 and 10, and the other one picks the number, and thus that gets us whichever closest that number is to our good and our bad feature. Though keep in mind, we do have this little rule in effect called the Godfather rule, where, back at our most recent anniversary episode a couple of weeks ago, Adam and I were given a single veto to use, and it's burn a hole in our back pockets. We have to use it at some point before May of next year, and we basically have this veto that if we hear one of the 2 choices that ends up getting picked from the other person's picks, we can say, you know what, I don't want to cover the movie, so actually I'll take the cannoli, unless that choice is gone, and we have to go with whatever other choice is there. And Adam, next week it is the release of Jurassic World Dominion, which I'm sure you're very excited about.
Yeah.
Right, yes. The newest entry in the Jurassic Park franchise. We decided, you know what, even though the series itself has gone off the rails of being in a theme park, the original started off where they were all at the Jurassic Park, the actual theme attraction in universe. So we decided to do something interesting and do amusement park related films. So basically anything either based on an existing amusement park attraction like a Disney ride or whatever, or something that prominently features an amusement park of some sort in the story.
Yeah. A little weird subgenre, but it definitely exists.
Yes, and I will say I definitely champion this as a Florida boy who went to the various theme parks many times.
You got fucking 9 of them down there.
But, Adam, I have the 2 good, you have the 2 bad. So please, for my 2 good choices, assign them between 1 and 10.
All right. You know what? I'll just go straight up number 1.
All right. Well, at number 3, I have a very interesting version of what could be like a theme park movie. One that, when I was looking through my potential choices, it wasn't one that sprung to mind originally, but I'm like, oh, no, of course, I would love to cover this movie. It's a film from the 60s. It is the sort of beloved, surreal horror classic Carnival of Souls.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Didn't expect that, did you? Oh,
no. I know that's a good choice. Yeah, I'm good with that. I never expected that. I'm not taking the cannoli on that.
Yes. And on the other side of things, over at number 9, I had Adventureland.
Oh, that movie's solid, man. I'm not crazy about it, but I like that one.
It's a really enjoyable movie, yeah.
Yeah,
I think that one got kind of lost in the shuffle of the 2000s. They were like Judd Apatow comedies of sorts. That one stands out a bit
1,000%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay.
Now, Adam.
Uh-huh.
Bad. Very curious about this. I'll go the other direction from you. I'm going to go with number 10.
Okay, so at number 9, I had, which is just basically, unfortunately, a knockoff of an existing thing by one of the original creators based on true story. I have the Johnny Knoxville film Action Point.
Oh, okay. I have not seen this. I'm curious something else because I got into the Jackass kick earlier this year. So you know what? I'm curious to see what this is. I am not going to take the cannoli on that.
And at number 2, I had Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that one is so weird because in some ways I think it's a bit more interesting than Jurassic World, but also it's much worse as a movie.
No, I completely agree. It's got way more interesting ideas. It just doesn't capitalize on any of them.
Right. Also, much better directed because it's a much better director than Colin Trevorrow. Juan A. Bayona. Much better director. But all right, yeah. So, Carnival of Souls and
Action point.
Action point. But until then, everybody, this episode is going way over budget. Let's do some re-recordings and reshoots, and I'm sure it'll do fine. I mean, it'll get the most downloads possible.
Yeah. We got to redub our voices.
Yes, of course, and we'll have
Mike Myers do a Scottish accent for both of us.
Yes, and we'll have Gerard Butler, oddly enough, doing an American accent.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, really weird.
Right, really weird.